so good to be back here at the Zinnov conference. Thank you, everyone, for joining in. It's amazing to see all of you after a break of 3 years.
How was it?
It's awesome to have all of you here today, and thank you, panelists, for joining in. I just want to get started by doing a quick poll. How many of you actually attended day one of Zinnov conference, which was yesterday? Okay, many of you, about 80% of you. Great. So most of you heard Pari set the tone around the role of India and the fact that global leadership from India is set to be the new normal for the ecosystem. Obviously, Pari talked about how this is one of the top 3 pillars of economic growth, how the whole GCC ecosystem has evolved over the last several years. In fact, this year we are celebrating 40 years of GCC establishments in India. Right? So really 40 years ago, this wave started, and of course we have come a long, long way in terms of the contributions that we make in terms of product innovation, in terms of go-to-market, customer access, even quantum leaps on technologies like artificial intelligence, machine learning, blockchain, and so on. So I'm very excited to kickstart things here. Our topic is really talk about global leadership, and at least one of us is on the right seat. We'll get started by just learning from these leaders who all represent global companies and who in many ways drive global roles from India. I'll get started with Sarv. Can you help us understand, and Pari did talk about a lot of drivers in terms of why this could be the right timing for global leadership from India, but just to level set, just to bring everyone on the same page, why do you think we are at the time where something like this could even be imagined in terms of an output from the Indian GCC ecosystem? Why is the timing so good and so apt in terms of driving global leadership from India?
It's not about whether the time is right or not. It's really about what we have built and what should it mean to the companies that are looking for talent here. I think if you look at, the service industry has proven that, leaders from here could change the landscape of a complete industry globally, right? I think we have, we learned from that. And then from there on to the last, 20, 30 years of GCC growth and what we have witnessed in the last 10 years, specifically how the momentum that we have seen from a scale point of view for GCCs, and the kind of depth we have over the years built. And also, if you look at outside of it in the market, the kind of digital leadership that we have seen being demonstrated from India, Aadhaar, UPI. Now I'm in conversation with folks in Iceberg and also with the government as well on the privacy, the consent kind of thing. It's very, really thought leadership kind of activities that we're seeing at a global level from here. And we've changed the landscape in the country, what technology could mean to solve big problems in the country. That's digital leadership. And not just, also if you look at the startup ecosystem, from the copycat kind of proven ideas coming and solving some of the problems that we need to solve as well for our country. In addition to that, the kind of tech platform companies that we have seen that have become unicorns and being listed as well. I think enough proof points there to show that this market has leadership. And therefore, I think it's a question that we have to ask is that, can we step up? Can we step up to provide leadership for the Fortune 500s of the world from here, as opposed to just providing talent? And I think that glass ceiling has been already broken. We have seen some of our friends going and becoming CIOs and global CTOs and global product leaders. I think it's a matter of now stepping up and doing more of that. And then another thing, key question, if I'm a decision maker in a Fortune 500, the key question that I have to ask is now, have so many folks in India, a sizable percentage of my companies in India, and therefore, should I not see commensurate number of leaders coming from that population? If not, it's a huge disservice to shareholders.
Absolutely. I think you bring in a lot of interesting points, but the fact remains that there are a lot of convergence of drivers which kind of is creating the platform, if you will, and there could be multiple angles in which this leadership could scale from here. Let me turn to Sanket very quickly, and I know you and I were chatting offline, and you had an interesting take on what global leader itself could mean in the first place, right? So could you help the audience understand what really is a global leader from India? What does the construct really look like?
Absolutely. So one of the things here, Praveen, is that I think we have to stop looking things as a step function and more like a continuum. And that's the journey we're on. And typically, when we talk about global leaders, we think of perhaps general managers leading the entire product globally. That is, of course, a global leader. But we've come a long, long ways. I'm more of a glasses half full kind of guy than a glasses half empty. So over the past decade, if you see, the product management community has grown tremendously in India. UX was something people did not look at for India, but UX is doing really well. Just yesterday, we had a lady leader who was the UX leader for, I'm forgetting which company. So I think we have to take a look at global leadership in a slightly different way. It's, of course, a challenge to run a complete product out of here. There are several people who are doing it. Sarv mentioned there are several people who are global CTOs based out of India. But you know, somebody running the entire back office for a finance organization for a company is also a global leader. And majority of us are known for scale.
Right.
The kind of scale that India provides is unprecedented. In addition to that, a lot of us are also running global teams. We have teams in various countries. That makes you a global leader. And the kind of stuff we actually do here, where each of us starts our morning at 6 a.m. with some calls and ends the night at 10, 11, 12 p.m. With calls. Those kind of things and the ability to work with disparate, geographically dispersed teams in a very efficient manner and achieve scale at the same time is an amazing mark of leadership.
Yeah, I think that's a great point because you're right. Many people think of leadership purely in the business, like top line outcome construct, but to be able to deliver on that top line, there could be many operational, functional roles which could provide global leadership. Lalitha, you've been in one such role, and a couple of other panelists are in the same vein, so we'll come to that. But what has been your experience? Can you share a little bit of your own story in terms of how you created this role for yourself, and how does the mechanics of something like this look, specifically, when you do it from a market like India?
I think I would say this is almost like a natural evolution, right? I think when you started the conversation, you said for the GCoEs or GCCs, whatever we call it, we have it about a 20, 40 years of maturity from the market perspective. And when you build that kind of maturity in the Indian market, and when you move from delivering bottom-end services into more of a value-added services, and you grow up the value chain, naturally, there will be interest for such kind of talent which may not be existing at other parts of the organization, right? Because the length and the breadth of any of the GCoE, GCCs in India deal with is probably sometimes much larger than the headquarters itself, because of the disconnects from the functions, and this is more of a here you have the visibility for a global totality. And I would actually challenge saying that why only global leadership we are talking about. I think in future, if you have to be a CXO for any organization, if you don't have this kind of a GCoE, GCC kind of an experience, probably it will become one of the qualifiers.
Amazing, I love that,
Okay,
I love that. Ranjan, you've been in a similar spot. You've been driving a global org as far as the GBS is concerned. And unlike other companies, your advantage is that you are in the B2C space, which, by the way, is also a large market so far as India is concerned. And Lalitha, you are in the same space. Walmart, Akhil, you are in the same space as well. Does that provide any additional advantage when you think of global roles from India? I mean, it'll be amazing to learn about your own journey in terms of how did that happen over the years, and then more specifically, are the drivers of market providing any further impetus in terms of landing a role like this?
That's a lot of questions. But just a mic check. Can you hear me in the back?
Yes. I think it's
Yes, no? Oh, okay, great. So, Praveen, thank you. First, let me tell you my story. So, PepsiCo was late or is late to the GBS game. We only started 3 years back. So our first agenda 3 years back was to establish these centers. And we hired people like me around the world to just go and do that right away. And we just put our head down and created whatever we had to create. Then last year, around the same time, We were then sizable, 5,000 people globally, where we believed that there is a need to get a chief of operations role who will be responsible for transition and process excellence, service delivery, quality, talent attraction, culture. And my role just evolved. And I got the chance to go into that role and hire a backfill for the India MD role. So I think you asked the question to Sarv, why now?
Yeah.
If not now, when? I think the time is
Absolutely.
here. We have to go and get it, and these roles will become more and more, coming up to all of us. The second question you asked was around why is it happening at this point in time? I think somebody spoke today morning, and I know I'm going to mispronounce it. Swalpa adjust madi, right? So I don't speak Kannada, but I got what this meant. That please adjust a little bit, right? I think in this VUCA world that we have seen in the last 2.5, 3 years, where you can't predict next week, forget about next month. You need intellectual agility. And I think by and large, Indian leaders and also some other cultures around the world, prepare yourself for the VUCA world. And that's also another reason I think where Indian leaders are being recognized in an uncertain, uncharted world of the future. And the third question you asked was around something to do with B2C. So while our consumers love our products, we are an equally strong B2B company because we sell through our customers.
Absolutely.
And they range from the biggest stores in the world to the smallest neighborhood shop. So I don't see that as a reason or a driver for these global roles coming out of here.
Absolutely. And Akhil, just to round up on this, you've been doing a global role, of course, for Walmart. Tell us a little bit about the pandemic period and what kind of acceleration did it provide to companies like yours to even think more aggressively about pushing for global roles from wherever. Could be India, could be any other markets, and we'll come to some of that as well in a moment. But just take us back into the pandemic period and help us understand.
Please don't take us back to the pandemic.
Okay, well said.
Virtually.
Well said. But just at a high level, what kind of acceleration did the organization witness in this period?
Well, yeah, the pandemic changed everything, right? Day one, we were good. We knew what we had to do in the whole year. We understood how the customers shop. We figured out what the basket will look like and what we should sell. And then the pandemic hit. Everything changed. Nobody wanted to buy what they were buying before, and they were buying something very different. Every market was actually reacting in the same way, just a few months apart, right? Europe got hit first. Then it went to US, then went to South America, came to India. And what we were seeing is the customer behavior kept changing, but just a few months apart, as I was saying, the people were following up. And as it kept evolving, we've realized that our customers are more alike than different.
Right.
We were always thinking, hey, the customer in Mexico shops very different from the customer that shops in Canada to India and all of that. But at the base of it, everybody's needs are the same. Maybe the way they buy it, maybe once in a week, once in 2 weeks, once in 5 weeks, or whatever it is, right? Or maybe a little bit of more meat, more vegetarian, or more healthy versus was something else and things like that. And then when the pandemic hit, we realized that we don't have to sit right next to the customer.
Right.
We don't have to sit right next to our business to really understand this. But if you understand how retail works, we should be able to make the right kind of decisions. And good thing for us was that we had people who worked in various geographical locations, various international markets, had a lot of experience, had moved back to India, and they were with Walmart. So we had that experience, we had that knowledge. And it was just a matter of somebody stepping up and saying that, you know what, I can go run it.
Right.
So I lead all of international e-commerce for all of e-commerce for our international markets. So it's Canada, Mexico, South Africa. All of marketplace engineering is led from here. So we've had global leaders who really evolved in the last 2-3 years. And the pandemic has kind of proven that, yes, we can do it from wherever we are.
Right.
Of course, it means more travel. It means a little bit of work-life balance, as you were saying. I mean, I don't have to get up at 6 in the morning, so luckily I don't do China, so it's fine. But yes, late nights and stuff. But what we realize is it's the same for every market.
Right.
So when I have a team that's sitting in the US and they're working with South Africa, they have to do those timings.
It's not
they work with China, it's the same. So it's all about location has become secondary at this point, and it's more about talent.
Absolutely.
And if you have the ability to go make a change to help transform the business, you can do it from wherever you are.
Yeah, in fact, Pari made a very good point yesterday around data powering customer insights, right? So even if you're not with the customer, the fact that you have data on the customers is more than enough for you to evaluate what needs to be done and build new products and new experiences and so on. And I think the whole pandemic period kind of gave a lot of acceleration to some of that. Good. So I think we have
If I may
established
add
that
something real quick.
Yes, please. Yes.
That's okay. What you were talking, Akhil, I began thinking that the pandemic gave rise to a greatly accelerated path towards what we call the digital headquarters.
Yep.
Meaning that you don't need to be in a physical place, right? Your office is wherever you're working from. And so collaboration softwares, et cetera, became super important. And I mentioned that also because if you'd like to study your customer, even if the customer is not local, already Indians were excelling at that by various strategy, periodic trips to the actual market, having meetings, being able to do things virtually. That was our forte.
Yeah.
I think with the pandemic, it came to the forefront.
Just became
and
the
it
norm.
became super important. So
Yeah.
that greatly enabled us to actually grow the entire industry much, much faster than otherwise.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
sorry, one thing to that, right? What it changed is the mindset.
Yeah.
People realized that it can happen. Earlier, they were not sure about it. When pandemic made it necessary for everybody to evolve and change their mindset, and that made things go a lot faster.
I think if I
Yes.
can just add, I think it's also one of the biggest fear in global organizations' minds is the BCP. I think India has proven in the last 2 years there is absolute all BCP plans, everything worked perfect. I think that also gives a lot of
Confidence and trust.
for the industry, other organizations to go ahead and do it now because it can be done now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just to add to all the points. And what we have witnessed in the first few months of the pandemic, because the kind of work that I do or my company does, we've seen 2 years worth of digital transformation.
Absolutely, we did.
In just 2-3 months, right? And then also, to the point that you all made, we've seen through our researches, we learned that more work could be done remote than we thought was possible.
Yeah.
And including repairing world's most complex machinery remotely, right? So that's also a
Absolutely.
point, yeah.
Yeah, and I love the digital headquarter concept. I think back in the days, one of our friends created headquarters of the East concept, and now we are at a point where digital headquarters seems like a good possibility. Serve a parallel ecosystem, and don't hate me for saying this, but IT services has been a little bit of a competitor to this ecosystem, if not in all parts, in some parts of the industry, right? They have tried doing digital headquarters. They've been putting a lot of people in India because talent is available, talent is great. But I don't see, honestly, a lot of global leaders or global roles being done from India. Maybe it goes back to the definition part in terms of how do we even think of leadership. But you work with a lot of services companies as well in your current role. What are the insights that are picking from there, right? Are they able to do magical work without having leadership, or are they also transitioning? Is this becoming the new normal? How do you think of that ecosystem in parallel with the GCoE ecosystem?
Let me start with the first point that you made, which is the notion of competition,
Competition, yeah.
Exactly.
which I see not.
Yes.
The reason is that the GDP, the tech GDP today is 5%. I think the last time we checked it was, I think 2 years ago. The contribution of tech to the GDP is 5%.
Right.
And it's predicted that it is going to be 10% by 2030. You're talking about a lot of digital activities happening, a lot of digitalization happening, right? So therefore, we need more people in the tech than we have now. Therefore, I don't see a competition. And but GCCs still are relevant. Why? And the number of customers in the last are Fortune 500s that I've the technology users, if you will, that I've met in the last 5 years, and that wanted to set up GCC. Why? The drivers are different. But digital, every company is becoming a software company.
They are.
Right? Therefore, you got to have some of the core capabilities inside for you to differentiate, for you to compete against the the digital natives or the born in the cloud kind of companies that you see in every industry. And therefore, software becoming your core competency, there, you can't keep outsourcing that for long. And yes, you do need the SIs for certain kinds of workloads, for you to have the scale that you need as you become a software company.
Right.
But you need to have the core within, and that's the driving force behind the growth of GCCs that we have witnessed in the last 10 years.
Right.
And therefore, I don't see a competition here.
Both can coexist.
Yeah, and in terms of leadership, I think, yes, there was some need for the services businesses to move some of the leaders close to the customer. That was needed at that time, the scale that they have been operating, and also the kind of role that they wanted to play with their customers. They want to be closer to the customer. But it's not that it was a complete depletion of our movement of leaders to those markets. Right. You still have a sizable population of the service industry leaders here as well. I mean, you're talking about CEOs still resident in India. TCS or HCL, they're all here. And yes, in recent times, we hired some non-Indians as CEOs. That's good, and they are there. They are, and those are all good thing that needs to happen. That needed to happen to take the industry forward, and therefore, and it's not that there is no leadership in IT services. Right. Yeah? And can we, as GCC, step up to have more leadership? Yes. We have seen, but also we have to be careful about what we are asking for as well, right? I think, can we have all kinds of leadership here in GCC? Yeah. And what's the sweet spot? I think that's important for us to really hone in and build those kind of capabilities as opposed to just asking for, I need leadership here. Can you have a CEO here? Can't. You can't. Can you have a chief sales officer? You can't. Can you have your head of product engineering for a particular product line? Yes, right? So we got to be careful about what we choose to fight for.
We think of, which roles we think of from an India perspective.
Can I just...
if I can just,
go ahead.
Sorry,
Lalitha.
if I can just add with some examples. I think, first of all, it's not competition.
Sure.
It's a dependent ecosystem. A lot of us do work with partners.
Yeah.
But I think as the GCCs are maturing, as there are more and more global roles in India and the digital headquarters, so the whole notion of who is your customer is also going to change. Right. So if the customer is the digital headquarters, which is going to be in India, service providers will also be forced to put more
people here,
and more global roles here, which is going to interact. In our case, it is a reality, right? Because we work with strategic partners, and as we give a lot of work for them, and I sit here, a part of my global leadership sit here, and we are now asking them, why should the account manager sit in Europe? So we're saying, 80% of your work is happening in India. We want the next account leads to be based here. So it will influence the GCCs, and the ecosystem will influence each other. And I think the narrative is definitely going to change for future.
Love it, love it. Ranjan, you had a point as well.
So this point about IT services versus GCC. So I have seen both worlds. Many of us have seen both worlds. One, they are not competitors. They are parallel. They are not even complementary in my mind. They are parallel, large enough universes operating independently. And success is one is not a predictor of success in another. Because the mindset that you need in GCC is very different than the mindset you need in a third-party IT services kind of a play. And I was part of the wave you talked about when a lot of leaders went to close to markets. I was in the US for several years in my previous company. That was because we were seen as an Indian company, and for us to be able to do business in a certain country, you had to understand and have the empathy and be present. I think that was the reason for some of that. In the GCC world, that is becoming less and less important, and very, very rapidly. And that's why you see some of that here. So it's important to understand that we don't compete.
Makes sense. Absolutely.
I'll just add to that.
Please.
Sorry, Praveen, this is an interesting topic. So slightly contrary to what you said, I do agree from an industry perspective, these are parallel worlds. But in my case, even in Sarv's case, actually the paths intersect quite a bit. And it's a very complementary, it's a very symbiotic relationship. In fact, we work very closely with the SIs to help them get more manpower, get more people trained on our technologies, because the world's implementation happens in India. Right. And so that way, so each of us, of course, have relationships outsourcing our own work, but it truly helps our customers. So it's an amazing, relationship between them. And then the other part is, if you take a look at the markets, right? Now the India and the near India market is growing quite
Much
a bit.
bigger. Yeah.
And that's an amazing opportunity for us to step up. And the path to these things is actually true partnerships, with these providers.
I think that's a great point because a lot of times the whole Asia potential is underrepresented. I mean, 40% of Fortune 500 companies, 1,000 companies are headquartered in Asia, right? So even from a market access standpoint, it might present significant opportunities. But I want to come back to a very important question in terms of the role of India, right? And imagine if this panel was happening parallelly in Latin America, in Egypt, in Mexico, in Philippines. Everyone is kind of pitching the same thing. Everyone is trying to create more leadership. Everyone is trying to prove the point that there's talent, there's quality, there's market, et cetera, et cetera. So Akhil, I want to come to you and understand, and for the benefit of the audience, why does India matter? And how do you think of positioning India versus other markets which are pretty much doing the same thing in terms of asking for those global roles or leadership programs and offerings and positions to be created from those markets? How do you think of India versus rest of many other centers that someone like Walmart would run?
Right. Well, I wouldn't handle the versus part, but if you really look at the India aspect of it, what works for us is the depth of talent we have. And in the last few years, the breadth that we've created. So you take an industry, whether it could be retail, telcos, services, whatever it is, we have people who have a lot of depth in that industry. And this came in 30, 40 years ago. You mentioned that GCCs have been here for 40 years. The IT service industry boom was 25, 30 years ago.
Yep.
We have people who have a lot of experience, have played really strong roles, made a lot of impact, and obviously build the skills. And then we keep churning out a lot of engineers, a lot of people, just talking about the technology industry per se. So we do have a great education system. We do have the right kind of experience which is coming in India right now. So we've got all levels of people with all levels of experience which is available out here. And what works for the other countries, for example, I've got teams sitting in Latin America, I've got teams sitting in Canada. Local language makes a huge difference. When I have to work with a business who speaks primarily Spanish, I do depend a lot on the teams out there. But from an Indian perspective, if I really want to look for a specific kind of talent, the chance of finding somebody out here is much higher than outside. So if you look at the local ecosystem, startups in the last few years created a lot of talent, created a lot of innovation mindset. A lot of people coming back to India after a lot of experience outside has brought in a lot of this. GCCs have created a lot of talent. So all of this put together, it has become an extremely strong ecosystem for us to be able to find all levels of leaders to make various different impacts around the world.
But Ranjan, can we really afford to be complacent with this fact that we have a lot of talent? Because talent is great, but as a country, we've also been going through a lot of challenges, right? Existential challenges, some of them are, right? Do you agree, disagree in terms of India's position? Is it time to be complacent?
Yeah.
How should one think about that?
I think the answer is no. We cannot. And, every time I go to our centers in Mexico and Egypt and Russia and Poland and China not so much recently, the question comes, how do you rate us against Hyderabad?
Yeah.
And how do you rate us against Cairo and so on and so forth? So I always avoid that question because, it's like 5 fingers of the same hand. But you will be surprised how much many of these countries are investing in their talent, in their ecosystem, and in their infrastructure. So they are all looking at India, getting inspired, and want to fast track this journey.
Yeah.
So we have the advantage, like you said, of 40 years, but it will not take 40 years for many of them to catch up.
Absolutely.
The way they dress, the way they talk, the way they articulate themselves, the way they think, the way they watch Netflix, the games they play is pretty much the same now around the world. The language they speak is English, and people are investing. So we cannot afford to be complacent. And if I can take just 1 minute, because this room is full of leaders, many of you will take global roles in the future. So how should you think about preparing for that future? I just earlier today thinking about a 4 C's model. First, have the courage to experiment. Everybody you see on this stage has done a variety of different roles in their 20, 25-year-long careers. And they have had the courage to try new things and fail. So please have the courage, broaden your toolkit. because that will be very important for a global leader. Second, please develop cultural empathy. In a global role, you cannot just be an Indian leader behaving in an Indian way because it has worked for me here. So that's the second thing that I would recommend to you, cultural empathy. The third one is communications. I think one thing that we don't do well in this country is storytelling. So although, in our childhood, we all have grown up listening to grandmothers and grandfathers' stories, somehow the education system reduces that over time. Storytelling is very important in a cultural context. And finally, capability. Please make sure that you build your personal capability, credibility, competence, which is very, very important. Because if you can do all of these, then we will have a further crop of senior global leaders in the future. So no, you cannot remain complacent.
Let me jump in. The stat that we have, tech being the 10%, contributing 10% of GDP by 2030, we can't be the sole supplier of talent. Yes. Let me tell you, there's a huge need there.
Right.
And there are also need for capabilities closer to markets as well, right? I think it's a coexistence. And I think if China is a competition for India, no way. Let me tell you, having built centers in China, and the local need for China is pretty huge.
Right.
And also, Chinese companies, their aspirations are different. They want to be big global players as well. Therefore, there is a lot of local need to build that kind of a ecosystem there. Therefore, are they looking at competing against India to be the GCC or the next best GCC? Not really. Their aspirations are totally different. And similarly, Egypt, is it a competition for India? No way. The output in Egypt is 20,000 graduates a year.
Yep.
That's true.
It's very tiny, looking at the needs. So same is true with other kinds of countries that we're talking about here.
But didn't Israel prove it the other way? Israel was a very small ecosystem as well, but the quality that comes out even today.
Great, absolutely great. But the point here is that, the point he said, how do we become global leaders understanding this and take those kind of ecosystem also along with this?
Right.
I think that's how you demonstrate global leadership, being proponent of diversifying talent and setting up new places, leveraging those capabilities. For Egypt, for example, every grad speaks 3 languages.
Right.
Arabic, English, of course they speak great English, and also one of the continental European languages.
French or German, yeah.
Right? So therefore, that's needed.
Yeah.
Right? Therefore, being a global leader, how you would take advantage of that. I think that's something, those are the kind of things that we need to build in our leadership arsenal to think about that, act like a global leader and being a proponent of, building a global network.
Yeah, and one of the things.
Adding on to what Sarv is saying, and it applies to all of us. When I need to take a decision of where to seed a new team, I don't default to India.
Yeah.
I look at what works for the company because we are all aligned to that. We are aligned to what our goals are, what our business goals are, and what is right for the company. So we want this entire ecosystem to develop because each center really brings something which is very important and something required for the success of the company.
I think it's an important point because it goes back to what Sanket was saying in terms of the definition of leaders, right? You could be a leader based in India and really leveraging the Indian ecosystem to its most advantage, but you could also be a leader which is not based in India but might have roots in India, like Pari talked about Suresh yesterday, right? He started from India but now became the CTO for Honeywell globally, right? That's where I think company first and then everything else is downstream from that makes it extremely important. Sanket, how should one think about leadership? Is it leaders have to be based in India or India should become the hub for exporting leaders globally?
See, all the leaders here have been talking about something super interesting. We have to get away from the us versus them mentality, right? It's not India versus this country or that country. There's so many jobs in the world. We're becoming a digital world, right? There won't be any shortage of jobs. In fact, there's the consulting company IDC came up with a concept of the Salesforce economy. I'm sure they have a Microsoft economy and all of these economies are there. 9.3 million jobs will be created by 2026, right? It's absolutely amazing. We need people for that. There's a huge shortage, so the more the better. Now it all depends how you structure it. And in the similar manner, it's within the company. It should not be India has this, you have that. I think we should actually exercise leadership and see what we can do here. Now, what we do here, nobody else can do.
Right.
Each of us has been a technology leader, a business leader, handling real estate, looking at HR. Nobody in the world outside of India does these kind of things, okay, because of the scale we're handling. And why are we doing it? Because it contributes to the company overall.
Correct.
I think one of the things we need to really get better at is the communication part that Ranjan was talking about, that a lot of us are doing things, we're launching things out of here. You know, when I was at Oracle in partnership with you guys, we launched a startup program globally. In addition to doing those great things, we need to talk about it and let people know. And with that, you become part of the overall global fabric of the company, and leadership naturally comes.
Yeah.
But let us get rid of this, give us this, give us that mentality.
Yeah, and before Lalitha, you respond, I want to ask you a question in terms of like what I heard from people, right? The big question was, as leaders, should we think of moving horizontally, meaning we're doing GCC, we could do IT, we could do startup, we could do other companies in India? Or should leaders be thinking of moving up the ladder within the same organization and not do role from India, but take up a global CIO, CTO, CDO role? What advice would you give to leaders traversing that path?
I don't think there is any success formula there.
Okay.
I think it all is very individual, specific, and what works for you best. And more importantly, what you enjoy doing. Yeah. So if you have to move parallel to move up or move up wherever you are, it all very circumstantial, very individual specific. But I just wanted to bring one point in addition to what Ranjan said. Ranjan talked about what are the things which you need to do to be thinking about the qualities for the global leader. But I would also say you also need to recognize the barriers which will prevent you from being a global leader.
Absolutely.
These barriers can be very different for each of the organization. It could be distance bias, it could be technology, people can't do business bias. There are multiple different biases out there which prevents from these global roles coming to India. So it is extremely important as an individual to recognize what is your organization barriers and how do you deal with it? How do you promote yourself and your ecosystem?
Absolutely.
Which is very important as well. So don't discount that part and think that things will fall in your lap. It will never. You need to grab the seat and sit at the table.
Yeah, I think it's a phenomenally important point. Ranjan, what is your advice on the challenges that some of these aspirants are going to face as they think of building global leadership from India? What are the top 2 or 3 things that come to mind?
So my daughter doesn't listen to me. She's 15. So I'm assuming most of you won't listen to what I'm going to say, but still I will say this. Nothing of great quality is built in a fraction of a moment. And your career is, if you want to make something of your career, please invest in it. Careers are not fly-by-night operations. So please, whichever company you choose, whichever line you choose, spend some time. Give yourself time, grow in it, learn about it, become an expert, and then only you will make a global career. A global leadership role will come your way.
Wonderful. I know we're running out of time, but I just want to round up with one last question on white space opportunities, which are the panel before us, right? Are you as leaders able to spot any white space opportunities where global leadership can be done with a lot more ease? I mean, nothing comes easy, but relatively speaking. Pari did touch upon ESG, for example, yesterday. He also talked about startups, right, which I think, Sanket, you also touched upon a little bit today on the panel. There are things like cloud computing, right, where it's all driven by talent and there's no other place but India to be able to do that. Are there, in your view of the world, are there segments like that where India leadership is going to be a no-brainer, right, because of people, because of ecosystem access, things like those. So as a roundup to this panel, what are the top 2 or 3 low-hanging global leadership segments that comes to your mind? Maybe we'll start with Sarv and go across the board quickly.
A couple of things. In my recent experience that we've been exploring, right? One is India's with 1.34 billion people, with so much of demand but not enough resources to meet with healthcare or any industry that you take. The demand-supply gap is this, right? Therefore, technology or digital is the only way to bridge the gap. You can't build hospitals fast enough, train doctors fast enough, right? And to meet the needs, growing needs. And therefore, to solve unsolved problems in a large country like India, if you can focus on that, and
domestic
market. And 2/3 of the world has the same problem. That's one, I would say. And here, privacy or those sort of things, is a big thing. I mean,
Absolutely.
how do you, in this context, how do you influence policies, law, if you will, and also create the technology backbone to, that's something that we're exploring, working with stakeholders here, right? I think that's a globally exportable thing. And similarly, with the digital, growing digital need globally, with the huge services ecosystem that we have here, as a company, we can probably work with a few hundred customers,
Sure.
not thousands of customers. Therefore, how do we work with the large SI ecosystem that we have, and jointly build a business to target a lot more customers that that we can't touch ourselves directly, to help meet the unmet needs at a global level, right? So,
Got it. So broadly, domestic market and vendor management. Or
so those are some of the things that we're exploring as well.
Okay, good. I love both of those.
I'll
Very
go for
quickly.
one role.
Yes.
Chief Startup Leveraging Officer.
Wow.
Most global companies, including mine, they intuitively get that they need to solve their problems using startup, but they haven't figured it out.
Sure.
And India,
Can be the hub for
especially
that.
Bangalore, the skills that will be required is somebody who can understand, assimilate very different problems and know where to get the solutions from. If we can crack that, there are 500 Fortune 500 companies. Those 500 roles could be here in Bangalore.
So disruptive innovation on the back of startups. Okay, wonderful. Akhil?
The India stack.
Okay.
I think that's an amazing piece of work built completely in India for a scale that's been unprecedented. So we've got that ability out here, and I think we should do a lot more of those, where it's born in India and goes out globally.
But in terms of leadership from India, that's established, people are going to use it, but what are the newer white spaces that one can think of? Like he said, domestic market or vendor management, and stuff like that, like startups.
Yeah, I mean, I would align with what they're saying. I would say that we should be able to leverage a lot of those. But what I was really thinking about is we need people who can actually think scale and build for scale. And that is what the world needs at this particular point of time as companies are becoming more and more global. So this is a great opportunity to build for scale within India, experiment it, try it out, and go home.
Maybe for agri or education, healthcare.
Healthcare
all scale
is a
problems,
very-
right?
yes,
Okay, wonderful. Love it.
Going towards the last sucks, by the way. Scale is the issue.
Yeah.
Scale is a major issue. And when it comes to things like various parts of the India stack, UPI, for example, great notoriety. I think we're the most digitized country in the world as far as digital transactions are concerned. Let's take that global. We use WhatsApp much more than any other country in the world. Let's leverage that even more. So these are the kind of things that I think we can truly do. And what we can prove with scale is just absolutely amazing. So we should embrace it.
Sure.
Might not necessarily be completely new areas of technology, but we can really help in the market penetration here.
Absolutely. Lalitha?
I know everybody talked about a lot about digital leadership, but I think also process leadership should not be ignored. Because all the technologies at the end of the day is supporting some or the other business processes.
Yeah.
Right? So I think process leadership, there is a tremendous amount of opportunity to be done from India, and that shouldn't be ignored.
Wonderful. I know we are out of time now, but thank you so much. Really appreciate you spending time and discussing the potential of this. I'm very confident that India will become the hub of global leaders. If not now, then when? If not India, then where? So with that hope, with that excitement, thank you so much once again for joining us, and thank you, audience,
Thank you.
for being with us today. Thank you.